companies, but it's also bad for us as consumers, as citizens. What exactly are our rights? What exactly is it that we can expect? And honestly, I think we're in an existential crisis, right? I think we have all these tools that we're trying to use all in different ways to deal with these big companies. But I don't know if we're actually clear on what is the future that we envisage that would be a better future. Because if you don't know what the better future is, then it's very difficult to get there. And this is, I think, what the problem is, right? So maybe the benefit of the silence here, to use your wording, is that the court didn't want to be the one to say what the future should be, which I agree with. That's a political question. But it also didn't give any real legal guidance on what can be done to get anywhere. And that's a problem. But I think it's a problem, because I guess I'm a pure legal academic. I like, some framework and consistency and coherence in our decision making. I think that would be nice. But you're right, that's one thing they did do, is talk about collaboration between data protection authorities and competition authorities, which is also an odd, it's an odd part of the judgment, because they're saying that there should be a duty of sincere cooperation. This is something we love to say in Europe. We should sincerely cooperate with each other. But it left the door open for saying that if the data protection authority hasn't done anything, the competition authority could do something if nothing has happened yet, but they do need to inform the data protection authority. There is an attempt at bringing some kind of framework for collaboration there, but it's not very robust, which I don't think the court could do, because that would be legislating, right? But I don't know if it really helps. So I think a dispute between authorities could be a problem, unless they all just decide to let the competition authority do whatever it wants to do. And so I'm really interested to hear that there are disputes between authorities here, because fundamentally, normally, you say a particular authority is in charge of a particular type of problem, but this is not how digital markets work. There is no one problem that fits in one box, right? Data protection, competition, consumer protection, they are all one and the same problem. So it's artificial to try to put them in different boxes. So it's inevitable for there to be disputes, I think. Which is why I've said this last time I talked, but I think maybe in this kind of situation, competition authority shouldn't be involved, data protection authority shouldn't be involved. We need a regulator that is dedicated to this sector and this sector alone. A sectoral regulator, so that we don't have the disputes between authorities. And the Digital Markets Act in Europe is kind of that, but not really. I'm not that impressed with what it looks like, but it was a good start, I guess. So I don't know if that answers. Yeah. Okay.
Magali, you brought a very interesting point here again, because we have a discussion in Brazil underway. It's a Bill of Rights about to regulate the digital platforms. And when it started, the initial idea was to have a regulator, but it was not a specific regulator. It was the telecommunication authority to regulate this market. And more recently, CADE understood that CADE is the proper authority to regulate the digital markets. And there's a debate underway in Brazil. Just to mention that.
Magali, just based on your last words here, and also the comments from Professor Vicente, I was just thinking that maybe here in Brazil we're going to face a problem that is a constant problem, because it's really common in Brazil to have one specific issue that is regulated by a specific regulator, and then the competition regulator, and then the data protection regulator. We have multiple regulators, and besides the regulators, We also have, just like this case you mentioned related to WhatsApp, why do we have the federal prosecutors? Because we have the commission inside, the whole board that takes care of competition and consumer protection. So they also can, start some investigation. And we also have another problem is that our judiciary, and generally we don't have judges that they are very comfortable to deal with issues related to regulation in general, not only. Then you can imagine if you're talking about something very specific, it's even becoming more difficult for them to face juridical and then prepare a decision that can have this holistic view related to the subject. So I think this is something that maybe you can just share for us, because for Brazilians it's pretty clear that we will always have this kind of uncertainty related to some subjects, because we have these multiple regulators, and also because we have also a judiciary that is not very comfortable to deal with some topics. But as we have this imagination that I'm not sure if it's something like we are dreaming on, or if it's true enough, we don't know. How do you deal with this? Because you considering that in EU we have multiple jurisdictions. So even though we don't have several regulators, we have different people and different systems that need to be coordinated. And I think that maybe this is something that you can share for us, and then we can learn from it. And also, I think there is another topic that Professor Vicente just mentioned here, not only related to the case, but also related to the regulators and the ongoing bill. Here in Brazil, we have this fantasy about bills will solve all the problems, and it's not true. So we have several bills all the time. We are always discussing a new bill. It's something amazing. And this is another point that raises that some people will start to say, oh, maybe we need a new regulator. And of course, we have several problems related, we can see now, because the data protection regulator is now starting to show some movements that in the beginning was impossible, because they had no money, no budget, no people. So they created, but they needed time to start this work, and the expectations were really high for them. So we are just trying to repeat it with a new regulator. I'm not sure it's the best way to do it, but the fact is that then I would like to hear your perspective, the UK and EU perspective. Here in Brazil, this is a very political sensitive subject. There is an environment, a favorable environment, political environment that just put these subjects highlight this topic, and that's why we are giving so much attention for it. So maybe you can just share a little bit, then we can have the whole picture, at least based on your experience in EU, UK. We are not talking about US, right? But then I think we can have these reflections and think about our situation here in Brazil, and maybe try to help them, like we like to do, like Professor Vicente, the academia, we are always trying to help when everybody is very involved with these topics and start to think that we can do everything.
Okay, so no pressure there. First of all, the European Union and the United Kingdom. So I'm originally, I still am an EU citizen, but I live in the United Kingdom. I work in the United Kingdom, and it's really interesting to me because the United Kingdom is trying to, has adopted now a bill to regulate digital markets, and it was slower than the European Union, but it has some significant differences to the EU version. But we don't know yet what it's going to look like in enforcement. And both in the EU and in the UK, despite the differences, it is in fact the same authority that deals with competition that is dealing with digital markets regulation, which I understand, because I think in terms of the resources, the manpower, the knowledge, the expertise of dealing with these companies, it makes sense because these people already have experience with these companies. But I do have my doubts about whether this is the best approach, but it is, I think, a logical approach. The UK wants to do slightly differently from the EU. They want to have a more, how do you say it, more negotiation-based system where they, instead of immediately being clear on what the actual obligations are on the companies like Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Amazon, they will set out big principles and then negotiate codes of conduct and negotiate what that would look like in practice, which I'm interested to see how that will work out. There might be advantages to that. But so I love the UK, and if anyone from the UK is listening, this is not a slight, but the UK's economic power here is minimal, I think, because ultimately, and maybe I'll be wrong, ultimately, I think the default approach of the big companies will be the one for the biggest consumer group. And the European Union is the biggest consumer group. Why would you have a fragmented approach? Why would you have a different approach for the United Kingdom as for the EU? We're literally next to each other, and we communicate with each other all the time. So it might not be such a great idea to have a completely different approach just for the few people in the UK. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think all these questions are interesting. Having all these bills, having all these regulators, but what is your power in enforcing it? I think that is the far more important question. What is your clout? What is your bargaining position with these companies? If you massively depend on them and your consumers and your citizens depend on them, how much are you going to be willing to push back? This is a problem we already face in the EU with the adoption of artificial intelligence. Facebook was threatening not to bring a particular artificial intelligence service to the EU. And I thought, yeah, great, I don't want it, right? But a lot of people in the EU are saying, oh, but we want the best artificial intelligence. So maybe we shouldn't push too hard. So this is existentially, this is the crisis, right? So I don't have advice on what to do in Brazil, except that maybe this is about globally agreeing on an approach so that we actually have some counter power against these companies. All of us coming up with different bills is not going to solve anything, is it? Like if Brazil does something different from the European Union, the UK does something different from the European Union, and the US does nothing because currently they do nothing, is there any point? So that's the first. And then cooperation in Europe, for the most part, is actually pretty decent. Because I think we share an idea that what matters is to keep the market integrated and common and whole. Things start going wrong when we have countries or regulators that politically want to be different and they want to no longer be part of a common European project. But I don't think that's really about the resources and how we have created our authorities. I think it's a spirit, right? It's a philosophy of we're all working towards the same goal of having a common integrated system. And I think it's because it might seem far away, but for us, the spirit of the world wars is still quite fresh. So I don't, there is a lot of procedural solutions for how regulators should cooperate together. There are some that I'm working on a paper on where I think how we should divide the line between different authorities. But ultimately, all of this is me just, intellectually having fun, because I think the political will to cooperate is far more important than any kind of procedures and rules you put in place. So I guess if the one message is here being in Brazil might be that I think we should probably sit together and come up with a common approach to regulating these companies. Otherwise, I don't think we're gonna solve the problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Magali. I would like to know if someone would like here to get this opportunity to ask some questions to Professor Magali. Okay, you have two.
Ladies first. No?
Hi, everybody. I'm Angela. I study in Mackenzie University. I haven't graduated yet, but I'm really interested about competition law. And I join you in your opinion that we should find a universal and a global solution for that, because I mean, Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp is all a global thing, you know, everyone is adapted to that. So, but how would we do that? That's my question. And who should like start it? I don't know. How is the path?
Okay, my name is Vinicius. I am a doctorate student here in Mackenzie. The competition law is not my field of research. I am researching data protection, and therefore my interest for this event, for which I really thank the professors, the organization. It's a great opportunity to learn from you. And how can I say? I see that the uncertainty of the concepts is leading to the very dangerous doubts concerning the competition law, and therefore it may benefit the biggest organizations and turn, like we say in Brazil, it is when you shoot your own foot. I don't know the expression in English. And I see many things like this regarding the data protection. It's the really same thing. We impose a lot of rights for people, individual rights, but by exercising these rights, we just benefit the big organizations because we allow it. We give them our consent. So when the professor says that there must be a collaboration in an international level, should how can we do that with more precise expressions, more precise rights, and in different with different economies working together? How can we approach this? It's maybe a very hard mission, but what would be the first steps for it?
Hi, Professor. Many thanks for being here with us. My name is Vinicius. I'm a student here in Mackenzie. Professor Vicente has been orienting me. And I have some points and noted some things while you were speaking. And from my point of view, the digital markets and the digital platforms can also offer advantages to competition and consumers. Once they are compliant with the law, of course. For instance, they provide more information about products, facilitates the easier research about prices, for example. And my question is, do you think digital market regulations such as DMA or the new UK law could make the business of the business operation of platforms unfeasible? Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Vicente, Juliana, and Marco.
Thank you. So how and who? Look, this is a difficult question, and I am worried about, in a way, being, what's the word for it? Eurocentric. Because there has been, I mean, I travel a lot, and in some countries, what they do is they wait for a European project, whether it's a law or a decision, and then they use that as leverage to impose similar conditions on the companies in their own country. And I think this is what has happened with data protection. And I think to some extent, this is what's happening with digital regulation. And I think the European Union loves that, right? So I don't know, there is a book by Professor Bradford, which basically says the US creates the companies and the innovation. It also speaks about China. And then the EU sets the standard of regulation and protection. And we are so proud of that. But that means that whatever is being set as a standard is a standard from a European consumer perspective, and we are not the same consumers. I do not need WhatsApp in my life. I can do without. I do not need online payments. I can do without. I am very aware that I am from a very privileged economic situation where I could live without these companies. But I don't think that's true, for example, for Thailand. I don't think they can live without these companies. And so for us to come in and say, this is how we should regulate this and these standards, that's a big thing. But I think de facto, that is what is happening. I think the European Union is setting the standard for digital regulation and taking the leads. What I wish is that there was more interaction where there was more space for other countries to come in and say, okay, but do you know what the effects are of the regulation you are setting and the standards you are setting? The only thing that we see so far is US pushback. But pushback is not really what I think from the US particularly we need. What I think is we need to have more dialogue, right? So if the European Union wants to be the regulator for the world, there is definitely a democratic legitimacy problem there, right? Because we're regulating for citizens that are not our citizens. So we should have more of a conversation. And I think that's on Europe. And I think because it's difficult to do that because you're constantly busy doing things. And there are networks, there's like the International Competition Network where these discussions are being had. But that's technical discussions. It's not openly public, democratic discussions. So I think this is, to me, the next step is to have these conversations about what is the impact of digital regulation that is being done in Europe. But again, that's a very Eurocentric view. I know what we have, and I think we should have a debate about it. If other countries came up with other pieces of regulation and they were better, I would actually think that would be quite nice to do it the other way around. But that is not currently happening. So yeah, that's the first thing. But yes, I'm very uncomfortable with Europe being the regulator for the world because I don't think it's a legitimate thing to do. But I think it's really the only situation we have. And you're saying the uncertainty benefits the biggest organizations. I think this was true for data protection. I am not sure if it's true right now for digital regulation because I feel almost sorry. Almost, not entirely, almost sorry for Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, because they are spending all their time in Brussels. They are there all the time in workshops, in debates, sending people, discussing, debating. Facebook offers to create a subscription model and says, look, that complies with what you told us to do. And the European Union says, it's not good enough. So, okay, but what, what alternative should they do? So I'm starting to feel sorry for them. So I think here the biggest organizations are not benefiting. Maybe they will in the future when the dust is settled and the rules are clear. But because the rules are not clear, it is a moving target, right? The rules are so vague that if Google offers a solution, the European Union can say, we don't like it so much. Come up with something better. And there is no clarity in the law of when that stops. So this is different from data protection. There's no one principle of consent, for example. So are we making the business models of these companies unfeasible? To some extent, yes. Yes, absolutely. I think we are not all the time, but one of the things that when I wrote my PhD, in one of the chapters I wrote that we have, and I think this is changing now, but we had accepted that of all the business models that could have arisen on the internet, advertising-based business models were the default. It didn't have to be that way. It was a group of like maybe 10 investors in the US that made it that way, right? They invested money in companies like Facebook, and they said you need to start making money, and advertising was the fastest way to do that. And so we got the advertising funded business models. It didn't have to be that way. We could have been more creative, but we let really like not so creative people take the lead. So maybe this model becomes less feasible. Maybe we're opening the door for different business models. But ultimately, that means that in the process, we are going to lose certain of these companies that might be bringing benefits in a particular way, and new problems might arise that we don't yet know will arise. But again, that's a luxury problem, I think, for places like Europe, because in a way, I think there is a willingness to sacrifice some of these business models on the path to what we believe is a better future. And I will repeat that I don't think that works for the whole world, right? Again, if I didn't have WhatsApp tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to communicate with you, Juliana. That would make me very sad. But sure, I'll go back to text message. Right? I don't use it for payments or anything else. I saw advertising on Uber for the first time when I was here. It blew my mind. Like, I'm already paying for a car. Why do I have to pay for ads, honestly? So, you know, I feel like a lot of these businesses are far more ingrained in other countries than they are in Europe. So I'm willing to sacrifice it, but I don't think this is true for everywhere else. So it's not really an answer. Yes, it's an answer to say, yes, I think we are making some of these business models unfeasible. I, as a European citizen, am not so worried, but I absolutely think globally that should be worrying if we don't come up with alternatives. I don't know if you know this, but years ago, the European Union tried to create its own search engine. It was the worst search engine ever. It was so bad. And now there's other attempts. There's a attempt to create a internet infrastructure, a European internet infrastructure that would be the baseline for the internet in Europe. It's a really cool idea. I don't know if it's going to work. And I don't think we can sacrifice these companies until we've got alternatives, but this is what we are doing. So yeah, I'm making more problems than solutions, I'm sorry. But yeah.
Magali, maybe you already answered my question, but once I read I think it was in the New York Times, I can't say that I agree, okay, but it was written there. US creates, China copiates, and EU regulates. Maybe EU is missing the focus on how to regulate, because when we check the big digital platforms, the super platforms, we can't find an EU digital platform. Just one.
Spotify.
Yeah, but just
Look, we have to have something.
yeah, it's Spotify. Yeah, but when you go in the list, I think Spotify. It's, I don't know, maybe the 10th, the 20th, the 5th. We have US and China, basically. Yeah, maybe EU is missing the focus how to regulate, and is not leaving space for EU digital platform to rise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is currently European politicians that are trying to say we should reduce the amount of competition enforcement so we can have big giants, which as a competition academic makes me feel so uncomfortable, but I understand why they're saying this. But I don't think the solution is less regulation. I think the solution is more investment. Let's be clear. We have a standard of living in Europe which comes with massive costs. And I very much enjoy that standard of living. But, you know, if you have more expensive workforces, if setting up businesses comes with high costs to start, if there aren't many big banks financing companies, you are not going to get the innovation that will drive things forward. But this is a political question about what future we want. Right. So one of the in the research center that I am deputy director of, we now have a working group about, is all innovation good innovation? And I think this is fundamentally the question we should be asking, right? What innovation do we want? Do we just want everything to come from anywhere and then we will regulate later the problems? Or do we want to have targeted investment in particular types of innovation? And I think we are missing the ball in Europe. We're so used to having been the powerhouse of the world that for the last 100 years, we've not tried so hard anymore. And we are being bypassed by the US and China. Absolutely. But regulation and competition has no role to play, I don't think. It's about finance. It's about labor relations. It's about subsidies. China massively subsidizes its countries. The US has started to massively subsidize its companies. The EU has very strict rules on subsidization because we think it's anti-competitive to overly subsidize. So what do we do? Those are the things we need to change if we want more innovation. But I don't know if all European citizens want more innovation. Maybe we will be left behind and the rest of the world will innovate more. But maybe that is a political choice. I don't know. And political winds are changing in Europe. But yeah, I think the New York Times is right. That is exactly the situation we are in. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Juliana, should we close the session?
Yes, I know it's taking a little bit longer, and Magali is always very open to all our comments and questions. I would like first to thank you, Vicente, in Mackenzie, for hosting this part of this week that we are dedicating to competition law. As we have here rising star, Professor Magali, that is always a great friend, besides being a great professor and researcher. And of course, I think we have here taking and also paying attention to the comments from Magali, Professor Vicente, and you all. I think we know that this is a topic that we are going to follow for the next months and probably years, because as you touch, Magali, I think we still have here issues to develop that are also related to the environment that we have here, especially talking about Latin America. She was really surprised about the fact that we are using WhatsApp all the time, and yes, we do it, right? And based on the fact that when we had one decision that the judge decided to cut WhatsApp, and everybody was, you can't imagine what happened that day. It was just like a little war inside our country, right? So the effect was even bigger than we could imagine.
WhatsApp in Brazil, Magali, is not as a social media. WhatsApp is for business also in Brazil. It's very common to change information with lawyers and clients using WhatsApp.
But then how do you get away from people? Like they're constantly on your phone.
We work 24 hours a day.
Okay,
They shouldn't have our WhatsApp here. Yeah, can you imagine at the end of the year? Oh, my grades. Oh, no. Come on, what happened?
Absolutely not. My students, but they will not get my WhatsApp or phone number.
Yeah, I think we are very sweet in Brazil, because in fact, we usually gave our number to our students. So it's super crazy, right? We know that. Maybe this can be the next topic for our conference.
Work-life balance.
Yes. But it's amazing to have you here, especially because you are doing a great job about Escola. And I think only to go ahead, and of course everybody wants to have lunch in the right time. But I think it will be good for everyone, especially because we are going to share this not only in the University of São Paulo webpage, but also Mackenzie about Escola and Escola, yes. So I think, yes. So thinking about Escola, and knowing that a scholar is waiting much more engagement from Brazilians. And we just had this very nice, amazing conference in Germany. I can tell you, I was really surprised by the fact that the professors, because I was thinking, I cannot say that, because I studied piano, but I can't, it's impossible, they're professionals. So it was really beautiful, everything was great, but I could hear that they are expecting more people from Latin America, and based on what we have here, that Brazil, we have much more scholars than outside. We cannot compare Brazil or with Argentina or Chile in number of researchers. So I think it's a great opportunity to you to share a little bit the changes from the last year, the future. I think this is something that may make some of you here in presence or online, pay attention a little bit more about this whole community. I think this is something that we must do it, and maybe you also can give some tips about the researchers that they are ongoing, doing some research to go abroad. But this is something that I think we must, create spaces for them to go abroad.
And you can announce the 2025.
I can, yeah. Yeah, so ASCOLA is the Academic Society for Competition Law. I am now one of the vice presidents, and I love the society because once a year, there's now 2 events, but there's one in-person event where all the scholars from the world can come together, present what is going on. So this year we also had 2 different panels where there were academics saying what was happening in their region and also enforcers saying what was happening in their region, including Juliana was on the panel. We also had South Africa and Germany and US and France. And I really want more engagement. It's one of the main things that drives me to be part of the executive of ASCOLA. Is I think, obviously I love hearing from Europe because it's what I do, but I think there's a lot going on in the world that we are blind to, we don't understand, and having academics come and present to us and say what they are working on and what is happening in their regions, I think is incredibly important. So I would love you to come to Chicago, which, so end of June, we will go to Chicago. There's also a newsletter for ASCOLA that I run. So if you want to sign up, you will get all the information in September about the next conference. I am well aware these conferences are expensive to go to. There is no sign-up fee. There's a membership fee, which is 40 to 80 euros, depending on whether you're junior or not. That's for the whole year. There's no conference fee, but the travel is expensive. If you are a junior scholar, you can apply for some financial aid. But yes, it's expensive, and I think that's why one of the problems with the conference. So another call is maybe the Brazilian universities should host it one year, I'm just saying. And then you can all stay here and join us. And on coming abroad, if you're a student and you want to study, I'm just going to do a pitch, and you're thinking about going to the United States, don't come to the United Kingdom. It is far cheaper. Our programs are excellent. The weather isn't great, but depending on where you go in the United States, the weather is bad as well. So I don't think a lot of Brazilians consider the United Kingdom as much. Maybe London. I was teaching in the London School of Economics. There were some Brazilians there. But come to Scotland, right? We do a lot of competition law, and we're a fraction of the US price. And we have very nice food. I know people don't believe it, but we have very nice food. Although you've been feeding me Brazilian food, so I feel like I can't really say this anymore, but yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, just to close the session, thank you very much. And thanks, Mackenzie, for all the support. And a special thanks to you, Magali, for being here with us today. Thank you so much.